What if I told you that one of the world's wealthiest organizations isn't a tech giant, an oil company, or even a government, but rather a religious organization based in Indonesia? Today we'll dive deep into the hidden wealth of Muhammadiyah, an Islamic religious organization based in Indonesia, which is worth over $26 billion. How did it go so rich? What does it do with its wealth? And why is it both admired and criticized? Stick around, because this will challenge the way you see money, religion, and power. Religious organizations have always shaped societies. They don't just guide spirituality, they run schools, hospitals, charities, and sometimes even businesses. And like corporations, they need money to operate. Globally, some religious groups are worth more than Fortune 500 companies. For instance, the Mormon Church is estimated at over $200 billion. But surprisingly, Indonesia, the world's largest Muslim majority country, is home to the fourth richest religious organization in the world, Muhammadiyah. Founded in 1912 in Yogyakarta by Kiai Haji Ahmad Dahlan, Muhammadiyah started as a reform movement to modernize Islam, resist colonial stagnation, and promote education. Today, it has become a financial powerhouse and a major social force. Ahmad Dahlan's vision was simple but revolutionary. He believed that faith should work hand in hand with knowledge. He believed that prayers were meaningless without contributing to the poor, the sick, and the uneducated. So he blended religious and secular education, a radical idea at the time. From this seed grew Muhammadiyah, a religious organization that embraced what we can call today as social entrepreneurship, an idea that built businesses but not for profit's sake, but instead reinvested into the community for the community's sake. Today, Muhammadiyah operates one of the largest private networks in the Muslim world. Its reach stretches from early education to higher learning, from healthcare to housing, all built over a century of community-driven expansion. Let's break down what this empire looks like in numbers. It manages over 5,345 schools and madrasas, around 172 universities and colleges, and 440 Islamic boarding schools. In healthcare, Muhammadiyah runs 172 hospitals, with another 20 under construction, plus 231 clinics across the country. And of course, its religious backbone, more than 11,000 masjids and prayer facilities. All of this is supported by nearly 21,500 wakaf assets, properties donated for religious and social use, covering about 214 million square meters of land. That is larger than the entire city of Jakarta. In total, Muhammadiyah's assets are valued at around 400 trillion rupiah, or roughly 26.7 billion US dollars. To put that into perspective, that is more than the GDP of countries like Laos or Brunei. Here is roughly how that wealth is distributed. About 45% in education, 21% in healthcare, 11% in religious services, and the remaining 23% in land, social enterprises, and other community activities. This isn't just money sitting idle, it's money circulating through society. Each year, Muhammadiyah educates about 1.9 million students, nearly 5 million patients, and supports over 1.3 million jobs. And geographically, the wealth is centered where Indonesia's population is. Java holds 55%, Sumatra 21%, Sulawesi 11%, and the outer islands 12%. That's a massive footprint, almost like a parallel state structure, one that runs schools, hospitals, and masjids independently of the government. But having all that wealth raises another question. How do they manage it? Where does all that money actually go? Unlike a typical corporation, Muhammadiyah runs on a reinvestment model. What it earns goes straight back into expanding its ecosystem. Think of it as a social enterprise network that never cashes out. Here's a simplified breakdown of how Muhammadiyah reinvests its roughly 40 trillion rupiah in yearly revenue. About 35% goes into religious and community programs, things like sermons, charity work, and dakwah activities. 25% funds expansion, new schools, hospitals, and business ventures. 20% supports employee welfare, teachers, doctors, and administrators. And the last 20% goes to community infrastructure, housing, and social outreach. In other words, every rupiah stays within the Muhammadiyah ecosystem. It's a closed-loop economy designed to sustain itself indefinitely. And it works. Between 2020 and 2024, Muhammadiyah's assets jumped 25% from 320 trillion to 400 trillion rupiah. Its yearly revenue grew by 60% in that same period, while surpluses doubled from 3 trillion to 7 trillion rupiah. That reinvestment strategy fuels constant expansion. Between 2020 and 2024, Muhammadiyah added about 230 new enterprises every year. Schools, clinics, cooperatives, and foundations. It is a system built on a scale, and scale, when managed well, becomes power. But with great scale also comes scrutiny. Over the years, Muhammadiyah has faced growing criticism, not necessarily for its goals, but for how it operates at such an enormous size. Some critics argue that the organization has become too bureaucratic, more focused on expansion than equality. Others question whether it has grown too comfortable with Indonesia's political elites. Its elite schools and hospitals, for instance, are praised for quality, but often criticized for catering mostly to the middle class rather than the poor. Then there's the issue of transparency. Despite running billions in assets, some Muhammadiyah units reportedly still use inconsistent accounting methods or outdated oversight. And one of the most public controversies came in 2024, when Muhammadiyah withdrew around 15 trillion rupiah from Bank Syariah Indonesia. The move sparked national headlines. Some saw it as an ethical protest over how the bank was managed. Others saw it as financially reckless, even risky for the national banking system. Muhammadiyah has defended its decision, saying it simply wanted better financial control. But the incident showed just how influential the organization has become, powerful enough to shake markets with a single decision. And so people began to ask, when a religious movement becomes this powerful, who should hold it accountable? Despite the controversies, Muhammadiyah's impact goes far beyond Indonesia. It runs schools and humanitarian missions in neighboring countries, from Malaysia, Thailand, and even as far as Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Its volunteers have helped in disaster zones from the Philippines to Turkey. And in Palestine, Muhammadiyah has provided aid and education support for years. In many ways, Muhammadiyah represents Indonesia's soft power, showing how a faith-based organization can deliver social impact at a scale. But this also raises the bigger question: can an organization this wealthy, this influential, truly remain humble to its original mission? Ahmad Dahlan's vision was to combine faith with service, that wealth should serve, not rule. But as Muhammadiyah grows, that balance becomes harder to maintain. And that is where the story of Muhammadiyah becomes more than just about money. It becomes a mirror for Indonesia itself, a test of how power, faith, and social progress can coexist. Muhammadiyah's journey is one of vision, ambition, and paradox. It began as a reformist movement led by a humble teacher, and became one of the world's richest religious organizations. It shows how faith can be a force for progress, but also how easily wealth can blur the line between service and status. Today, Muhammadiyah stands at a crossroads. It has the resources to shape Indonesia's future, to redefine education, healthcare, and social justice, but only if it stays grounded in its original purpose. So the question isn't just how Muhammadiyah became rich, it is what it chooses to do with that wealth next. Because in the end, religious power isn't just measured in money, it is measured in how deeply it transforms lives. If you found this story insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. And let me know in the comments, should religious organizations manage billions in wealth, or should they focus purely on faith and community? I'd love to hear your take.